What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have John Driscoll, NakedDev.com. And John, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, and John is a really interesting niche, app development agency, but he helps companies solve big problems, including helping raise money and other things. So we'll get into that, but some interesting episodes. I had Adi Clevitt. John, that was really one of my favorite ones. We geeked out on our favorite productivity tools and tech. And her agency specializes in SOPs. So she goes in and helps a company create SOPs. So if they're having, want to smooth out the client journey or the hiring process or any process, she comes in and works her magic and does that. So that was a really interesting episode. Right. It's like the non-sexy stuff that makes things work. And Kevin Hurrigan had an agency since 1995. So it was really interesting to hear his take on the agency landscape and the evolution, even business entrepreneurship, and some of the ups and downs through that time period. So check that out and many more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. And we do the most important thing, strategy. And then we also do the accountability and the full execution. John, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host so they can create amazing content, great relationships, and most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, even my guests. I just had one on earlier. I'm always introducing my guests to each other. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com to learn more or email support@rise25.com. John Driscoll is founder and CEO of Naked Development, and they're a cutting-edge mobile app development firm and creative agency. They're based in California. He has over 2 decades as an entrepreneur. Since 2018, they've generated over 3.7 million app downloads and counting. Some of the apps we may talk about are generating tens of thousands organic downloads a month. So we'll talk about that. He helped clients raise an impressive $96.5 million and successfully launched over 327 apps. Some of the topics we may dive into: strategies for setting up and navigating 8-figure exits for clients, how to attract and maintain relationships with high-profile clients. Some of their past clients include PGA, UPS, Bank of America, Peter Thiel, and many, many more. And John, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Dr. Jeremy. Is that what we call you, Dr. Jeremy?
You can call me Jeremy, but
okay.
As a recovering chiropractor, if you were on the table being adjusted, maybe Dr. J or something like that. But
Dr. J.
Yeah.
Hey, I like that. I like that. Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, no, I was thinking about what you were saying when at the top of the show here, and is podcasting the new networking? It kind of seems like it.
I believe it should be.
Yeah,
because here's the thing: this is all about you. But if I said, John, let's talk, okay, and let's have a get to know you call.
Yeah.
I'd be asking a lot of the questions, but why not make it go further? Why not help, give to you by having that conversation, produce content out of it for you that you can use, and people get to know you. I can learn from it, from professional development, and the audience can learn professional development. You get exposure. So it's a win-win all around. And now I get to know what you do, and I can refer you people, introduce you to people, and things like that. So I like to use it a lot of times just to introduce people in my network, so that when I introduce, you to, Mary, you can both listen to the episode and go a lot deeper and further with each other.
No, I think that's real. And
So
I actually had one of my most viral videos ever was just a conversation I was having in an interview. And it's interesting how in networking today we just like get to know each other through this medium, and then somehow we let other people in and watch it. It's just different, you know. I guess I'm old enough to just remember the old days when we just networked and nobody
right.
watched, you know.
And I mean,
So yeah,
the
it's
funny
cool.
thing is with my
Yeah.
guests, too oftentimes, and people realize, I have formed amazing friendships. I've gone to
Yeah.
people's weddings. I've gone on family vacations with people, and it's just really helped deepen many, many relationships. So
Totally.
likewise, like when
Yeah.
you're in Chicago, we'll probably hang out. So, or in
Yeah. Oh,
California.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
thanks for that question. But this is all
Oh,
about you the rest of the time. Talk
okay.
about naked development and
Okay.
what you do.
Yeah. So Naked Development, started as a company, to serve people who are trying to create applications, mobile applications. And, people come to us with various, kind of concepts that they're starting with. A lot of times they're trying to solve a problem in their industry, or they're actually trying to start a company. It comes from so many different places, but people mostly come to us at ideation. So they're basically, the first question we ask them is, what problem are you trying to solve? Because that's what we're here to do. Technology is just a medium in which to solve problems. That's all it is. If I could solve them without technology, I would, but it just happens to be probably the best medium there is. So we try to get to the core of that problem and really figure out, from a design standpoint, what would be a way to get people to solve the problem with, utilizing an app. So, and that's something we've been doing, since 2008, when the App Store first started. But we started Naked Development as really focusing on startups mainly. So been in the business since day one of the App Store. Yeah.
Why startups? I feel like
Yeah.
there's a lot of complexity in starting from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's funding and other things. Why startups?
That's a great question. I would tell you the reason why is because they're more innovative than big companies, and they often have more problems. See, I'm not trying to shy away from problems. I actually like problems, and you should too. When you see a big problem, then you actually have the opportunity to do something significant. If it's not a big problem, you can't do something significant. So when I think you're right, startups have more problems than big companies. Big companies they have tons of money, they can make mistakes, they can do it probably in a way that they shouldn't do it. When startups, they can't afford to make those kind of mistakes.
With the startups, who's an ideal client? Do they have to have some type of funding already? Because it sounds like sometimes you help them raise money, because to develop some of the stuff you develop is, it costs money and time and energy and team.
Yeah. So now that I've seen this happens hundreds and hundreds of times, and we get, over 200 inquiries a month from people trying to talk to us. So what we are currently working on actually is a coaching model to help people with no money really get to a place. I'm actually offering a 5-day free class that's coming out next month. And it's going to kind of help people, hey, if you have no money, because I've seen people go from very, very little money, maybe $15,000, and turn that into a company that sells for $500 million, literally, that they never put another dime in. And after seeing that multiple times, maybe not always $500 million, but to see people like go from nothing to cashing out big on their company, I think there's just a path that people are unaware of that you can take to, if you don't have resources. If you really look at most of the big startups that we all admire, a lot of them had no money. I think it was Airbnb that they only raised like $26,000 in 2 years of trying to raise funds. I would have quit probably 3 times in that process. That's just a terrible raise. But, they're obviously doing pretty well.
So out of the 200 inquiries, how do you whittle it down? Who is a fit?
Yeah. So The entry level now to us is about 20,000 to start working with us. We're going to get that down to free next month, which we're excited about. But we started 20,000 because they have to have enough money to design with us. Once they have that, then they can often raise money from there. We have about a ratio of about 60 to 70% raising funds to raise, to build the first version of their app, which might be $50,000 to $60,000 to do that. So it's far more attainable now than it was, say, 3-5 years ago, where it was much, much more expensive to make technology. Yeah.
So we're talking about raising money for a second. Some of the ways they use, obviously, the work that you're doing, they use it to make money and sell to customers. The other is they use it to raise money, right? They're showing this to potential investors, like, here's our proof of concept. Maybe they have traction, maybe they don't. What are some of the mistakes you've seen people make if they're using it for raising money purposes?
Yeah, I think the most common thing, is that people think that the data is going to sell an investor, or they think that the idea will sell an investor. And the truth is, those things matter, but they're not near as important as you. And so a lot of people, they have this thing: if my idea is good enough, then I don't have to be great. And that's just not true. You really have to build the idea and the image of a company that you're building, not a product. And that company has to be led by somebody that investor believes in. And that is probably one of the most misunderstood things I see. And so people often, they make a bigger app than they need because they think a bigger app means, that it's going to be more impressive, and they're trying to impress people. And you don't want to try to impress people. It's a futile exercise. So I just think that kind of approach is the mistake that you see a lot of people make. And we try to coach them. We offer weekly coaching. We guarantee you will meet investors when you work with us. That's actually a money back guarantee. You will meet investors. We have a lot of big claims and guarantees that we put on the line, our reputation and our money, to make sure that we can deliver.
Talk about that as an agency and company. I remember, John, I did a stint of, I don't know, a year of interviewing some of the top direct response marketers and copywriters on the planet. And they would say, as one of those pieces, a rock star solid guarantee is huge in a business. So talk about some of the guarantees.
Yeah. So the biggest problem, that you face when you're selling a service is people not believing you can deliver on that service, right? Like, that's probably the most common thing. And so by putting a guarantee in place, you're saying, listen, we know that you are going to like this. And so we allow you to meet with us for 5 hours on the first day. And if you're not satisfied, we will send you back money, every dime that you paid us. And it's because I'm so confident in our ability to consult with you that you are going to be blown away by that experience. And so I put that on the line. And I think you have to make sure that you're not delivering. You have to over deliver. And so if you don't over deliver, then you really kind of, you can't guarantee things, but if you do, you have this ability to make these grand promises that people are not used to hearing.
And then you mentioned also another guarantee was investors. And I'll put a caveat here, John.
Mm-hmm.
Part of a guarantee, I think, is it's a client selection thing, right? Because you can't guarantee that for everyone, but you're only going to select the clients or people that you can guarantee that for, most likely. So,
yep.
It's like, no, we're not guaranteeing this for everyone, only the people that we select to work with. So talk about the investor or introduction guarantee that you talked about.
Yeah. So one, you're absolutely right. We only approve 12% of the people that reach out to us. That's a selection thing. They eventually get to a conversation with me. And in that conversation, that 30 minutes, I'm really kind of evaluating it. We go to an approval process, and we want to make sure that if we sign on the dotted line, that we can deliver what we're saying, and that we think that you are a good candidate for the outcome that you're looking for, which is a successful company. So we take that very, very seriously, and we go through a lot of very deliberate steps to make sure of that. So you're absolutely right. Because the biggest problem is if I do introduce you to investors, I have to be able to vouch for you. And so I have, pulled back before and said, hey, I can't do that because you're not ready, you know, because it's important that my reputation when I introduce you to an investor is solid. I took a group up to San Francisco a couple 3 weeks ago or whatever, put them right in the middle of Silicon Valley, and three of them pitched in front of a crowd for the first time in their lives. And let me tell you, if you have not done that, you better be prepared for it. And that's what I try to do. I want to make sure that I believe you're prepared for it.
What is in your mind ready? What's, I don't know if there's a checklist of things you want them to have or see before you put them in front of that investor?
For me, when you're an early stage founder, I think you have to have realistic expectations. And when you're talking to a VC or something, they can tell when you're kind of starry-eyed and you have this really misunderstanding of how startup works and how that process works. And so what I try to do is really shoot people straight so that they're prepared. Because if they're believing that common narrative that they're going to be successful overnight, all they have to have is a good idea to raise money, and all they need to do is get this product to the market, and then the market's going to eat it up. It's going to be really easy. If they are saying things like that, and you can see it in the undertones of the conversation from a founder, then the investor is going to pick up on that really, really fast because they're just too experienced. They're going to pick up on all of that, and they have no chance to raise money with that person. So investors like people who are realistic and shoot you straight. And I've heard questions like, "What are you most concerned about in the market?" And the founder would say something like, "Oh, I'm not concerned at all." I'm like, "Geez, that's not good. You should be very concerned. If you're not scared a little bit." So they thought that the overconfidence would somehow sell the investor, and all they did is they did the opposite. They looked completely like they had no idea what they were really getting themselves into. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like they haven't done the research, or at least try to do research in that case.
Yeah, and I think it's research, but it's also just like, there's this thing that people have, and I've heard it so many times, like, "Oh, I just, God told me, or I felt it in my gut," or they have this mystical idea of that they're destined for this successful thing, and you're not. I'm sorry, you're not. You have to work hard. You better have realistic ideas and strategies on how you're going to get there, and you better be willing to change them when they're not working. And if you are not a grinder and you're not a hustler, you just don't belong in a startup game. Yeah.
It takes a lot, John, when with some of these apps to create these apps. Talk about the team that you've built over the years.
Yeah. So I've really, really focused highly on US based talent and trying to build at the highest level of quality. And the reason why is because I think the consumer can tell when you build a really, really good product as opposed to a what we would call a half-assed product, as we say. Sorry, I hope not sure if I could say that on your show, but I would just say we really promote building something smaller, not something cheap, and so we try to have really deliberate design. We take you through the process. You're involved in every step of the way. We're not just building it ourselves. And it's very collaborative. And that process has been dialed in for well over a decade, and that by putting everybody physically in the room together in California, like a lot of people fly in and see us and they spend time with us, and then to methodically work through a process that's tested over time, you get good work out of that. You really get to the core of the problem, asking hard questions. And so getting those people in and working with them, with the founder, it's like day one, they have a pro team. And most people can't do that on their own. That would have taken them a decade to develop that kind of a team, where I kind of did it for you. And that's kind of a big part of what you're buying when you work with us.
Talk about the hiring process for a second.
Yeah, you go through several stages. First of all, let's say you're a programmer, a developer by trade. We would say, oh, we want to see what you've done. Have you created anything? And you have to start as a junior developer. So you have to work under a developer and a senior developer. So you have to go through these processes once you actually work with us. But you go through that, we look over your code, we review your quality of your work, all that kind of stuff. And then you eventually go to a cultural interview, which means that we have to go, hey, will you fit into this culture? Because we find sometimes that's the interview that people don't pass. Like they're not going to fit in. Like they would like to be a loner. They don't want to work with people. They don't want to collaborate. That's just not for us. That's not going to work really well with us. So we put them through several stages to get there, and then they have to work their way up once they actually are with us, to become eventually, senior developers. And those people have been with us. We've lost very, very few over the years just because they're kind of almost lifers with us. Yeah.
And we were talking before we hit record about scaling, and with an agency,
Yeah.
sometimes that means with people, so it's tough and projects are coming in. I mean, it sounds like you have like a really constant flow, but other times, I don't know. Well, I mentioned whatever, you get a PGA calling and you have this huge project you have to do. How do you staff up and down depending on, even if you get the same number of projects, there are probably various degrees of difficulty.
Yeah, I think the best way is to have a core group that you never have to scale down with, and then you layer on contractors and people beyond that, right? But that should be your top layer of skills, not something that you have to, so you're really never scaling back. You're just adding on maybe a little bit of your contractor layer. And so it's kind of like it's like a layered pie, right? Like, or a layered cake or something. And you have like your core group, your leadership, and then you have these other things that maybe you outsource because you don't do that in-house. And that kind of, figuring out that combination is not easy. I definitely, know that it's challenging. But I think everybody's got to find that combination, so that they can, it's like McDonald's. They want to make sure that their burger everywhere is exactly the same burger. You kind of have to get to that point where no matter who the team works with, it's the same product every time. And that's not an easy combo to get down. It takes a lot of trial and error for sure. Yeah. I got to be a grinder and a hustler too,
From a milestone perspective, you started many years ago. What was the first major milestone from a client perspective with Naked Development?
I would say early on, when we first started making apps, that first couple of years, it was the wild, wild west. Nobody even knew if native apps would live or extend beyond web apps. It was really, there was a big debate in those days whether native apps were going to win over. And so when that was clear and it looked like native was here to stay, then we started to really make a lot more native apps. But before that, everybody was just trying to make the web mobile friendly in the early days. Like that was the biggest problem. And so I would say the first milestone was like us like leaning into native and realize, hey, the app store is going to be here. We're going to figure that out. And we started making, we got approached by this startup and they said to us, hey, we don't have a lot of money. We're like, well, why are we talking then? Because
that's a great way to start a conversation.
Yeah, like we don't have a lot of money, but they had this idea to work on this medical software for hospitals. And I said, well, that seems like that's impossible if you don't have a lot of money. He goes, well, we're going to raise money. And I'd never been involved in raising money ever. I'd always bootstrapped everything. I'd never seen anything like that. And so they said, hey, we'll pay you $15,000 to just design the app. And then we're going to go raise money. And they paid us $15,000. We designed the app and I never thought I'd ever see them again. And they came back to us and they said they had $1 million to work with. And we were like, geez, from that, that the thing we made you raised $1 million. And that was the first $1 million raise I ever saw. And then we made the platform it was a big platform. It cost about $500,000 to build. And they went to market. And then we were with them for a couple of years in that process. And they had managed to raise another $10 million. Like they really started killing it. And I was like, wow, learning that process taught me so much. And I wish I'd gotten a piece of that company, but I didn't. And so I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. And one thing I learned is don't let a company go that well and not own a piece of it. Now that I don't let that happen anymore, but I did in those days, and I didn't have any clue how to, partner up with people like that. And so now that just taught me so much about how to create a program that could serve people in that same manner. And so we started to help people to raise money after that. We said, we just patterned our whole system after what we experienced with that company. And so, and now everything we do is kind of based on a lot of those things we learned in those, first 3 years of working with that startup. Yeah.
I take it they had a big exit then.
They did. It was about it's rumored to be about $500 million. It's undisclosed, but it was an acquisition, and yeah, it was a big one. Yeah.
Talk about the equity piece, John. So now how do you think about or structure that? I could see a double-edged sword there where someone's like, yeah, John, we want to pay you less because we're going to give you equity, and then you're taking a risk. But so how do you smile, let you tell your thoughts on structuring equity?
The moment I mention this on any program, I almost regret it, because I'll get all these emails after that. They're saying, "Hey, we'd love to have you work with us," and I'm like, "That's not how it works. Let me explain that." So yeah, I'll explain how it actually works. So we don't do early investment with things. We formed a company called Naked Ventures to really support our equity positions in companies. And we're formalizing as an actual VC now. But what we do is, as we work together, we will see that the relationship's really good. That's the first thing we want to see. We feel like you're a great founder. We believe in you. We know that you're going to get there with or without us. And so if that's the case, I'd rather you get there with me, not without me. So we will, talk about what that looks like. And we'll take an equity position. Normally I will take a board seat in that case. And then I will advise you a lot for free in that process. And I might introduce you to raise some money. I will, we've often provided, we just actually did this with one of our partners, where we staffed up their people. And I will tell you, these founders who I've gone this far with and we've spent this many years with, they become like my best friends. Like, we spend so much time together, and they call me when they're not feeling good. They basically ask me the things that they can't tell maybe the rest of their board or their employees, right? And they're nervous. What do I do? They get into some really tough positions, and they need somebody that's been there before to say, hey, this is what I would do, in this case. And so that has been a really, really great program for them and for us. And we've seen a ton of success with the companies we've worked with. Yeah.
So typically it won't start off, maybe the initial project there won't be equity, but it just may be that, relationship where you help them with the app development and strategy and everything else. And from there, as you work with them over a number of years, then you may talk about some kind of equity stake and how that would work.
Yeah. And we've actually written checks. We've deferred invoices. We've bridged companies, like say that they're close to getting their Series A and we know they're going to get it. We will bridge, defer invoices and staff them for a while. We've done all kinds of creative ways to try to come alongside that company to get them there. And there's a lot of equity that they save in the process. So there's a big incentive for them to give me that equity, because they're going to get to their Series A and their valuation's going to double, and that stock's going to go through the roof at that point. And so there's, I kind of help structure a deal once we get there and say, hey, I think this is what a deal that makes sense. And I have all incentive not to blow up their cap table and keep them in a good position, because I want them to raise their Series A. I want them to get to the finish line. And so it's really, it becomes a real partnership at that point. And it's always a little different. because everybody's got different needs. But I would say, yeah, we look at all angles for sure.
I feel like, John, and you can correct me, it also may help save certain staffing needs. Like if they didn't have you, maybe they'd have to hire a CTO and a development team. And possibly I could see how if you had equity that looks good to the next investment, like, well, this is just like some company you're using. What if they go away? And you could tell me if I'm wrong on this, but presenting that your company does have equity, I don't know if that sheds makes it in a better light for when they are raising money, that you have some investment.
It's a huge advantage. Yeah. So because they're working with us and then we're on the cap table, there is some credibility. Just like, we're clearly not Y Combinator, but if you had Y Combinator on your cap table, it's an obvious who's not going to invest in that company. We are not those guys, but I would say, I'm not making a comparison for everybody listening. I'm just saying.
I just had a company, actually, Story Lane, the other day. We talked about it because they are a Y Combinator company and how that works. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, it really does. Your partners that are on your cap table play a big part as you are raising money. And I think we bring some credibility because of the projects we've worked on and that they've seen us have big exits and they've seen, us do this multiple times. So we have a track record. And if you don't have one, you get to kind of piggyback on ours. Yeah.
I mentioned attracting and maintaining relationships with high profile clients. And I know one of those people has been Peter Thiel.
Inadvertently, yes.
Yeah. So what's been maybe a story around Peter in your experience?
Well, so, to be clear, I don't know Peter that well. We're not like buddies or anything. I have other billionaires I'm pretty good friends with, but he's definitely a different kind of guy. So, but I was introduced to him through a client that actually raised money and Peter invested in that company. And so this just goes to show you never know how you're going to meet someone. You're working with a client and you don't know who they are. And this has happened to me several times. And all of a sudden there's this big billionaire behind their organization that you had no idea. And so you treat everybody the same and you try to value everybody's time because you never know what's coming. And so I got invited to an event at Peter's house. And so I got to go up there and talk to him about the product and meet him in person and spend a little bit of time with him. And so you get to go, oh, that's really an interesting, contact. And so it's funny because I ran into one of his buddies the other day at Mastro's when we were just out to dinner. And so like you're just kind of in these circles and that happens, and you don't ask them for things. Please, people, if you do meet these people, don't ask them for stuff. You're going to be put on the blacklist really fast if you do that. You have to kind of play it cool, I guess is the way you got to do it. And then there's going to be a day when you want to talk to them about something and you think it's worth their time and you ask at that point. And so I think these relationships take years and years and years to cultivate, and you have to be okay with that. And then when the right moment comes and you go, this is a good fit for Peter, I can make the call. And I want to be able to make that call when it's necessary. But it doesn't mean you do it right away. And I think that's the part that people miss, is when you get in the room. I see people just kind of misuse these relationships. And I know that all these people I've maintained relationships with, I can call them at any point and they're going to listen. For the most part, they're going to call me back.
I don't know if John, there's any learnings from that conversation with him, even if it's like how he thought about certain things you were discussing with the app. And if people don't know who Peter Thiel is, he wrote 0 to 1. He was one of the co-founders of PayPal. I'm not sure if you pronounce it, Palantir Technologies and Founders Fund and many other things. But people they've mentioned his book on this show, 0 to 1, many, many times. So check it out. Any learnings from just the conversation you have, just how he thinks about things?
It's interesting. A lot of what he does now is and you have to understand that this is just the truth. He's very politically minded. So he's a lot of his motivations are attached to politics. And so you better be able to play well in that world if you're going to get to know Peter. And so I'm technically, I don't even know if he knows this, I'm not a Republican, but I'm a libertarian, so I don't really care. Like that's kind of like the I don't care about politics guy. And I was in a room full of, you know, Peter's friends, which are all Republicans, and you know, just coming from that angle, you had to show that this thing that we were making had a political thing attached to it, and that was part of his agenda of why he got involved and why why he was in that conversation. And so I think understanding his motivations and what he wants out of the relationship is very, very important. You know, if you're going into a conversation like that and you don't know what he wants, then you shouldn't be in that conversation because you don't know how to have that conversation. So I think when I was talking to him, I was talking to him more about what he cared about. And this is one of the tips I give people when they get into a room with investors is you shouldn't even bring up your thing until they ask you. I never bring up my thing until somebody asks me. I always walk in the room and I'm looking for what kind of value can I bring to somebody else? And I ask them and I dig in and ask them questions and I ask them more questions about that thing that they're into until they're digging it up. And at some point that attention will reciprocate on you. And I think that that's my strategy with anybody in a room like that. And so I knew what he was there for and what he cared about. And I gave money to that charity. Like, that's what you do. You do things like that because you're trying to get in the room with the right people and you're trying to bring value to the table for them. And I believed in what he was doing. So it was cool. But I think that's how you have to think. And I think that's probably why people don't get in those rooms sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, John, we have very similar philosophies on that, which is I'm thinking the same thing when I go, what value can I bring to someone else? And it may not be monetary. It may be a connection. It may be, I've had people pick my brain about health related things because of my background as a biochemist and as a chiropractor. So like, you just never know what value you can provide someone. It doesn't matter how much money or how much or little they have. There's always some value that we can provide someone. Because I feel like a lot of people, I don't know, well, they're really successful. They don't need anyone or they don't need something, but there's always something, whatever it is in their life that someone could bring value to potentially,
Absolutely. Everybody has their agendas, right? Like they have their things that they're working on, the things they're trying to do. And, sure, you want that person to help you. I've been just in the last 3-4 months, I've met some really, really good partners, but I met them by trying to help them with their thing. And then they came back and they really reciprocated that attention. And then even the thing I did might not even have worked out for them, but they still came back and tried to help me because we always say stuff like this. I feel like this is hey, we don't know what we're going to work on something together. We know that. So we're just going to keep talking. We're going to have cigars. We're going to have drinks. We're going to spend time together. And, I have my buddy, Chris Duncan, out in Australia, who I spent a lot of time with, and he's just a genius marketer. And he's helped me on a project right now that I really appreciate so much. And and so I'm helping him on stuff too. And it's just like, you just kind of scratch each other's backs. I think that's the thing. And if you're genuine and, authentic about that, that is so attractive to people. It's something that is really, it's honestly so easy when you just have the right intentions, I think, but it's hard for people that they're constantly stuck with an agenda. Yeah.
I think you hit it on the head. When your intention is to just bring value to someone, then there's no reason to be nervous meeting someone because you're just trying to help them. And that's the way I think about it,
Totally.
So one of the apps that you worked on was a dating app. Talk a little about that. And there's some, I don't know the full story, but from what you said,
Peter's app.
It's controversial.
Yeah. So that's Peter's app. That's the one he funded. So it's obviously has politically charged. And I try to be real honest about this. It's definitely, we're going to split the room on this one a little bit, but it's okay. We can all be okay about this. I love this topic because I do not know why a Democrat would hate this app. I honestly think they should be the biggest supporters of this app than anybody. So it comes from actually something related to Trump, and there was an app, for Trump people that were trying to date each other. That was actually during Trump's era. And people, what happens if you're on dating apps is you'll find, especially if you're in, like LA or something like that, and you are a conservative Republican, you are ridiculed on these apps. Like it is rough. And so a lot of these people really had a hard time dating. And so they wanted to have their own app. They wanted to go, hey, we want to go somewhere safe that we're not going to be ridiculed for our conservative beliefs. And so a really great founder, one of Trump's people in his cabinet was Johnny McEntry, and he used to be with Fox News, and now he's like a huge, you've probably seen it on TikTok. He's got a gazillion followers now. And he started this app, and he got Peter to fund it. And, Peter has that political motivation. And so they did. And it's so funny that they've gotten so much hate on the internet. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm a Democrat and I'm on Hinge, aren't I happy that all those people left and went to another app? Wouldn't that make me happy? I guess I don't understand the motivation why that would upset you. So there's so much hate on the internet about this app, and it was
What is the
parodied
app
on. Yeah, it's called The Right Stuff. It was parodied
The Right
on
Stuff. Okay.
on Jimmy Kimmel. They did a parody on that. It's been on every TV network you could imagine. And if you Google it, it'll come up for days, and you'll see people. There's actually a lot of hate on the internet. And I'm just going to dispel this complete falsehood about this app, that it's all guys and there's no women on there, and it's not growing, and it's a failure. Let me tell you, I've seen the data, folks. That is not true. This app is doing very, very well. And all the hate that you're reading about is people hating on the app because of the politically charged climate. But I don't understand the motivation behind it. I would think if I'm out there, I'm happy about these Republicans all dating each other on a different world. I just don't understand the hate of this.
Is this the app right here?
That's it. That's it. So
The Right Stuff app.
If you look at the ratings, you'll see that there's a lot of people just going, they're haters, and they're just people just trying to.
The dating app for the right wing is this
totally
right. Gotcha.
And I'll take credit for that line. It was something I came up with. Yeah. So I told him, lean into it. Don't be afraid of the controversy. And if you watch Johnny's content, he is not afraid of the controversy, and it's been amazing. And I understand political.
How did you get involved in this in the first place?
They just Googled us, I think, is how they found us. Yeah. It's funny. It's how most people find us. Or, podcasts like this, or, different ways that they hear about us on, all over the place. But if you Google best app developer in the world, we come up everywhere. And so it's a pretty good
SEO.
People, yeah, it's not bad. So that's how they found us. And it's been wildly successful. I'm such a fan of Johnny's and what he's doing. I think he's got it's such a harmless thing that I don't understand everybody getting so upset about it. But I have to always be really careful when I talk about it, because people get really.
Well, I mean, you mentioned, if you mention Trump's name, it's polarizing.
I know.
It doesn't even matter what it is,
Yeah.
It just could be anything, right? I mean, if you said you stayed in the hotel, which he licenses his name, he doesn't even own. I don't know how many of the hotels he owns, but I know the one in Chicago, I think, just licenses his name. He doesn't own the one in Chicago, but like you mentioned that name, and it's polarizing.
Yeah. No, it's funny. The golf course out here in LA doesn't get a lot of play because it says Trump on it. And so you can get really good deals on the rounds, and the golf course is spectacular. And I'm like, this is amazing. Why would I care about some guy's name on a golf course? I think that's just, man, people have got to chill out. Yeah.
Talk about user experience for a second, because you really have to think through user
Mhm.
experience. So I don't know if you want to talk about the dating app as an example, but some of
Yeah.
the thought that goes into user experience.
Yeah, we helped them create a feature that I'll call out, and I think Johnny wouldn't mind me talking about this a little bit. And we came up with a feature that we had not seen in any dating apps. And dating apps are actually a specific world that I love to talk about. I'm very much known on the internet for some of my dating data that I talk about. So one of the biggest problems that we face with meeting people online is the whole who reaches out first concept. And Bumble kind of started with that, with women reach out. And so we created a feature where you just basically a guy can put on where he wants to take somebody on a date. And I actually, because I'm single, I actually tested this out myself. And I was going to New York and I was going to see the US Open. And so I posted, and I was on the right stuff for a bit, and I was getting some interest, but I'm 52. I get it. Right. So, and it was happening. I was doing all right on there, but it wasn't great. And as soon as I posted the event date, which is like you post a date and then you say what you want to go do. And the ladies kind of get to see your personality by the fact that you're posting this date. And so it kind of creates more of a spike in interest. And so I posted, I had tickets to the US Open to go see the ladies semifinal, tennis. And it's a night thing. It's a really cool date. And I posted it, and man, the girls just came flooding in. And I was like, wow, this is really,
You're like,
really
I hit on
cool.
something here.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It was a cool feature. We call these sticky features. You're trying to find something that really resonates with people. And it was very different. There wasn't a lot of dating apps kind of doing this kind of thing. And so I got a ton of interest and had a lot of discussions and had a date. So it's really interesting how when you're doing user experience, how you're really trying to get into the psychology of what would make somebody do something. And to take a woman from, oh, I like his pictures to, oh, I want to go there with him. That was just kind of a whole different level of interest that we peeked into. And I actually think the biggest problem with dating apps is the fact that the user experience is addressing both male and female exactly the same way. And we are not the same, and I'm sorry, I know that's super controversial and all, but we are not the same. And we're not interested the same. What I've learned in the data is men look at the pictures of a woman and decide whether they like her. A woman has a very, very hard time looking at pictures and staying interested, which is why men swipe 50% of the time and women swipe 5% of the time. So the big gap between our interest level is because of the way the app is built in the experience. And so little things like that, not understanding the true motivation or psychology of the user, is a massive mistake when it comes to designing dating apps right now. And we're seeing it. It's not working. This big experiment we've been in is not working very well. Yeah.
John, I love this topic of sticky features.
Mhm.
Maybe that should be the title of your next book or something. But or maybe it's a subhead.
Yeah.
And going through, because we have limited time right now, but I love to hear like all the sticky features, because it's rooted in, like you said, psychology and behavior.
Mhm.
And that would be really interesting to hear. Here's like 10 sticky features and what we discovered across different segments of apps. And I'm sure there's things that apply to all of them. So I love that topic, but we're running short on time. So I have
No,
one last question,
sure. Go
although I'd
ahead.
love to hear for the next hour of all the sticky features you guys have created or discovered. First, I'm going to just tell people, check out nakeddev.com to learn more
Perfect.
and learn more about John and his company. And last question is just some of your favorite resources. It could be books. It could
Mhm.
be a mentor, distant mentor that you don't know, or actually mentor that's giving you advice. Some of your favorite resources that people should check out.
I have one right here, actually. So if you have not read, and I know he's blowing up, so most people are familiar with him now, but Alex Hormozi's book, $100 million Offers, is not, it's not just a must read, but it's kind of like, if you haven't read this book and you're trying to market people, I honestly feel like you're completely missing the whole thing, because what he's onto right now is changing marketing in such a massive way. And so I think that book is great. I think, I think the book that he actually gets a lot from out of that book, which is, gosh, I'm looking for it now. I didn't know you were going to ask me this question. So
The first one, his first book,
well,
or because he's got $100 million leads and $100 million offers.
yeah,
and
Leads is the second book, actually.
Got it.
Yeah, but $100 million offers, and then there's a book that he refers to a lot in that, and it is called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And if as a CEO or a founder, to me, the best kind of CEO is a marketing-based CEO. And so, because you're really getting into the mind of your user and trying to understand how to serve them best in marketing. So I think those two books are just fantastic resources for getting in the mind of how to serve your customer.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I love that book. Robert Cialdini's Influence. It reminds me of Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. So people haven't checked that out. It also gets in the psychology of why people do certain things. So, and then check out, Alex Hormozi's book, as John suggested. So check out nakeddev.com to learn more and more episodes of the podcast. And John, thanks so much. We'll see everyone next time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100 grand.